It is time to settle into the bar that is always open, it's always free, but they may or may not have what you want. It's a weather bar, folks. It's the Isobar, the highs and lows of meteorology. And I am joined by my good friends, Chief Meteorologist Emily Walls, down in Chicago, Chief Meteorologist Rich Luderman over in Detroit, and of course, myself. Rob Haswell, Chief Meteorologist here in Milwaukee. And, it's been 2 weeks since we sat down and talked, and it feels like it could have been 2 months. We just have so much to talk about. We're going to talk snow, we're going to talk cold because of Emily. We want to talk football, apparently. I just want to make it clear I didn't bring it up because, sometimes the Packers win, sometimes they lose, although we're doing pretty good against both your teams. And then in the longer range, we're going to talk about, Christmas and the brand new season of winter. Brand new, of course, in the astronomical sense. But let's start with the snow because it's been a busy couple of weeks. We haven't seen some of the biggest numbers here in Wisconsin because a couple systems missed us to the south. But already since we've talked, we picked up 6 or 7 inches worth of snow with some bigger numbers in our south counties, along with some freezing rain and slushy conditions as well. Now, Emily, you actually took the brunt of a couple of systems that sort of missed us to the south down in Chicago.
Yeah, and one of the biggest stats that we were talking about in the last few weeks that really grabbed attention here in the Chicago area is last year in total, the entire season, the snow season, only saw about 17.6 inches of snow. We've already surpassed that at Chicago O'Hare. So we're not even in astronomical winter yet. And we've already surpassed the amount of snow that we picked up last year. So everyone around here, has just been kind of like, hey, these are the winters that we remember. This is, there's been a lot of positive feedback, I will say. But I think people have been kind of excited and just in the holiday spirit because it's coming at that more convenient time, I guess, of the season when people get excited about the holidays and snow on
True.
the ground. And so I think it's been a little less of a burden for a lot of folks. But fortunately, the last couple of rounds of snow, some extreme cold, those really, wintry conditions, it's kind of come over the weekend. So it hasn't really been impacting so much a lot of our commutes for work and school in the last couple of
Yeah.
weeks. But regardless, it's been a very snowy season so far. And it looks like we're going to get a little bit of a break here in the next several weeks. Things are trending a little bit warmer, but we're off to a good start here in the Chicago area.
Yeah, there you go. And then, of course, Detroit, you've caught a few of these systems as well of late.
We have, we were up to about 12 and a half inches for the season, since the snow first started flying back in mid-November. And, we're about 7 inches above where we should be, this far along in the season. So we're off to a hot start. And I'm going to describe something that both of you know well. Last week, we had that system come through Wednesday, and I was returning from Key West, and we may talk more about that coming up. But,
Oh, yeah, we will.
well, I landed at Metro Airport, which is the main Detroit airport in southern Wayne County, and the northern suburbs of Detroit got a lot more than the southern suburbs. So it's always a tricky forecast when, the rain snow line or the snow versus wet snow line comes right through the viewing area because, we only have so much time to describe the forecast, whether it's 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And, when you're talking about 8 or 9 counties, it always makes for a challenging forecast. And sure enough, some parts of northern Oakland County had 6, 7, 8 inches of snow, and some spots south of Metro Airport had 1 to 2 inches. So it was one of those tricky forecasts, but most of us did get some
Yeah.
decent snowfall for the middle of last week.
Yeah, I like to call those zip code forecasts because depending on your zip code, you get a whole different forecast, right? Because we had the same thing here. Some of the systems that missed us a little farther south still kind of grazed some of our south counties. Other ones that tracked farther north, we had like a mix of slush and freezing rain in our south counties. So they got next to nothing when we got several inches farther to the north. Yeah, tis the season for us to spend, let's say, an extra minute or two at least each forecast. And convincing our producers of that is the difficult part, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
The battle rages on. All right. So, yes, there has been snow in the first half of December, but the cold, I think, perhaps has stolen the headlines. And I want to say, obviously we talked about this last time because people were already talking about it online, this big, switch of the pattern, this big push of polar air. And, we had not only some bitter cold, but obviously some significant wind chills. And here in Wisconsin, we had our first cold weather advisory of the season. And obviously, both of your areas were right in there as well. Maybe we'll start with Rich this time because, Michigan certainly had quite the chill and maybe even took it a little longer than what Wisconsin has had.
We've had morning lows in the single digits. Now, obviously, in our outlying areas, close to Ann Arbor, up into Lapeer County, I mean, they're traditionally 5 to 10 degrees colder than, the main urban areas of Metro Detroit. But we've had quite a few school closings already, and some of it is snow related. And I would say more than half of it is cold weather related. So it's a little early in the season to have these cold single digit lows, wind chills below zero mornings here, in the early part of December. It's not unprecedented. We didn't set any daily records, but it's been pretty cold. And thankfully, moving forward in the forecast, we're going to get out of this polar plunge. And that's good.
Yeah, we need a break.
I've been saying it myself, like I'm already worn out. It's not even Christmas yet, and I'm a bit worn out. I'm ready for a break. How about you?
Yeah, I'm certainly ready for a break here as well. I agree. We did have quite a few delays and closings, as many related to the cold as to the snow already this meteorological winter. Milwaukee didn't get above freezing, so didn't get 32 plus right through until about the 9th. So like the first 9 days straight, 8, 9 days straight of the month, we were at or below freezing. And most of those days were well below freezing. Our warmest day up to the recording of this was 37 degrees. That was a below average high. So we're really, really running cold. But like you said, there is going to be a pattern flip, and we can kind of circle back on that in a bit. Chicago, of course, Chicago, like Milwaukee and Detroit, has a rep for being cold and windy, thus Windy City. How'd you guys do down there?
It sounds like kind of just more of the same story that you guys were saying. It was very, very cold. We ended up seeing wind chills as cold as about 30 below in some of our far western sections of the Chicagoland area. So very cold. We've already had our first cold weather advisory of the season. We had a couple in our region, and we actually had sub-zero low temperatures even here in the city just a few days ago over the past weekend. So it's been very cold. I think for a lot of people, we've just kind of been trying to maneuver our plans, onto the different days, and that's been helpful. But as far as the cold goes, Rob, you were just mentioning that it took 8 or 9 days to reach above freezing in the month of December. We were pretty close to that. We were, I think, a day or two shy of that, around 7 or 8 days, but very cold. Our warmest day so far this month has only been 40 degrees, and that was pretty close to average. Our averages still sit right around 36, 37 degrees. So we were slightly above average. And after the cold start, everybody was excited about that. However, that high temperature actually happened right around midnight or shortly after. So a lot of people didn't get to enjoy that 40-degree temp. We were already back down to the mid 30s by daybreak.
Yeah, most of them slept right through that. That's a good point. We did have that weird little overnight temperature bump for sure. And you brought something up that I think is kind of interesting: the city versus country when it comes to cold, because each has its own unique challenges. Obviously it's really pronounced in Chicago, being the biggest metro of the three we're all located in here. But cities tend to generate a little bit of their own warmth, whereas outlying areas don't have that. And we, always talk about lakeshore versus inland, and in many cases in the winter, it's city versus rural areas. And some of our inland areas didn't even make it, or barely made it, above zero just recently. One of the Janesville, which is well inland from Milwaukee, closer to Rockford, Illinois, only had a high of 3 degrees the other day. I mean, that was it for the whole day, and it just shows some of the more inland rural areas get impacted, but then in a city, you have the added issue of population. And I know here in Milwaukee, the city opens up a lot of warming centers for the unhoused. And I'm assuming it's a huge impact on both Detroit and Chicago as well.
Yeah, that's always a really big talker around this time of year. Even during, I know we're going to get a little bit into the stats for the Bears game that we just had that was very cold, but there were even warming centers that they were setting up for fans that just couldn't take the cold. So I mean, it's something that you need to have, especially when you are in such a highly populated area. You are having, there's a lot of unhoused people. So we've got to find ways to take care of those folks. But fortunately, this is when the city really, really steps up, right? That's when we get those warming centers, the food banks, and a lot of just stores in general that will open up their arms and say, come on and warm up.
Right. Rich, I assume the same thing goes on in Detroit?
Yeah, for sure. We're talking football, and obviously Detroit has an indoor stadium versus Green Bay, Milwaukee, and Chicago. You're all sitting out there on those Sundays and Thursday nights. It's harsh. I mean, you know, I find myself talking about, football weather, parking and then walking up to Ford Field. I mean, I'm not giving a football forecast because it's indoor, but I'm giving a walking up to the stadium forecast. And, for some, it's a 20-minute walk, pretty harsh, and then you get in the stadium, you got to shed it all off. I know that's a difficult problem to have compared to your markets, but it's a lot, back in my Penn State days, I used to go to the football games and sit out there and make it through the cold. I remember it. I mean, here it is, 30 some years ago in my life, and I still remember being cold sitting in a stadium. It's not a great thing, especially if your team is, not doing great.
That's very true. Well, even at Lambeau, you're so packed in there. There's definitely some body warmth going on. But, they don't call it the frozen tundra for nothing. But, Emily, you had an interesting stat about the most recent Bears game.
Yes, a weather stat. I won't talk football because I'm not qualified and I don't know enough about the sport, but I do know about the weather. And with this past game that we just had against the Browns, it was the fourth coldest ever that was played by the Bears at Soldier Field. So that kind of goes to show you just how cold it was. So we had kickoff temperatures that were right around 8 degrees. Wind chills were about 6 degrees below zero at kickoff. And that whole entire day, that whole game, the city of Chicago never reached a wind chill that was above zero. So it was very, very cold. There were not a ton of fans that made it to the end of the game. So there was quite a trickle heading out after about halftime.
Now, were you, Emily, in the stadium? Were you at the end of the game there?
Absolutely not. I was warm and toasty in my living room with the game on. That's about it.
Very smart. Very smart.
Yeah, watching football on Fox is always comfortable because you have control of the thermostat. But in the live element, and as Rich pointed out, the Lions have the indoor privileges, we'll call it that.
Yes.
But Chicago and Green Bay, very, very different. But, it's part of the culture in Green Bay. Even if they, somebody decided to be a good idea, no one's going to let them build a roof on that place. It's got to be the frozen tundra or nothing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we better switch before our friends over at First and North, the podcast that airs on Fox Local with our sports teams, gets up in here and wants to take over. So as we shift a little bit, I want to talk a bit about the lake ice because we've been very cold. And of course, the little lakes are starting to freeze up and still, not really appropriate for the recreation that we want out there. But I checked some of the Great Lakes stats, and it's interesting. We don't have any significant ice coverage yet. We're too early in the season, but we are running well out ahead of the averages for both Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. In fact, Rich, Lake Huron, particularly in the peninsula there, in the thumb, as you like to call it,
yes,
it's pretty icy.
Yeah, Saginaw Bay is notoriously shallow, and Lake St. Clair is notoriously shallow. So sure. I was just looking at our tower cams here in the local area, and the Detroit River is mostly ice covered. Now it's flowing, wow. It's not backing up, but, there are some bends in the St. Clair River and the Detroit River, which connect, Lake Huron to Lake Erie. And in those bend areas, ice jams later in the winter season are quite common. So it's not unusual to see ice this early. But there's a lot of it, especially in those narrow channels and especially in the shallow spots of the Great Lakes system. It's interesting to see those big freighters. I mean, they're still going about their business. And when I show the cameras and you can see the freighters, what an important job that they do. And, we're safe in a nice studio talking about the weather. But the men and women who are on those freighters, through all of the ports of the Great Lakes, I mean, that's difficult work to be out there. Sure. And the ice is just one part of it, the weather, the wind, the temperatures, but the ice as well. presents challenges. Very interesting.
Yeah, no, fascinating stuff. And similar to you, I was checking some of our webcams. Our Sturgeon Bay cam showing a lot of ice there, and that portion of the bay up in Door County, the peninsula, certainly one of the iciest spots on Lake Michigan. And then even Manitowoc, a little farther down the shoreline there, very historic, Great Lakes City, very icy in the inland area. Saw one of the little tugs going through to break things up. And then, of course, Chicago, obviously built right on the lake, too. You've got Navy Pier, a big part of life in Chicago. I didn't see quite as much ice as per the recent readings down by you, but I'm sure you're seeing it on some of your cams as well, Emily.
So we're seeing it more so on inland lakes, of course, ponds, things like that, that from some of our cams. But the overall picture that we can see of the lakefront, still looking pretty watery, not so icy out there. And the Chicago River, we're not seeing any ice along there just yet, which, usually we'll see that later on in the season. But of course, as you mentioned, it's been very, very cold here, but not quite cold enough. So we're still not seeing any ice on our river.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Milwaukee River, the Connecticut River that come through Milwaukee, they're pretty icy for sure. And I'm sure it'll get down your way as well. Now, there is a warm up coming, though. So some of this ice might not make it through the next couple of weeks. Now, every day we get an update from the Climate Prediction Center of the 8 to 14-day temperature trends. And as of today, it stretches out through the 28th of December, so inclusive of the holidays. And it really looks like most of the lower 48, including all three of our regions, will be on the above average side through that stretch. So guys, the irony of getting through all this cold and all this snow and having these perfect Christmassy looking towns around us, to have it all melt away before Santa makes his big flight, it's going to be a bizarre turn of events.
I think it's going to be a disappointing one.
Yeah.
It's because we've already gone through all of this to set this really nice base. But, even this week we have rain in the forecast. We have temps in the 40s next week. So I was taking a sneak peek. Of course, Christmas is still, quite a ways out, but it's going to be creeping up in no time. But early out here, predictions, still models showing 40s, 50s for the Chicago area for Christmas. Of course, way warmer than what you need for snow. So unfortunately, while yes, we're going to see some fluctuations as we nail down that forecast as we get closer to, it does appear like we're going to be too warm, I think, for that white Christmas. And I was actually diving into some of the stats about the possibility of white Christmases over the years. And we only really sit between about a 41 and 50% shot here in the Chicago area. So it's not all that high. So I think it's going to be a little disappointing for those of us that have been hoping for that white Christmas, seeing all of this snow base melt, because we have quite a base out there.
Yeah, but it'll be a slushy mess when it does start to melt.
I know.
Obviously, Rich, Detroit's going to be in the same boat. We're all going to be above average for the next couple of weeks, on average.
Our weather service, our local forecast office, which is up in White Lake, and they do a great job. I mean, they compile these numbers and they put updates out all the time, and it's good fodder, for the TV types. But we always give them credit. We have graphics that always say, like, courtesy National Weather Service, because I really don't crunch the numbers a lot. I take what the Weather Service gives us sometimes. And I'm just reading some stuff that came out today, and they're saying the long-term chance for a white Christmas here is 35% in Metro Detroit. So that's pretty low. I would say the chances are that we are going to get some melting this week, and especially with the rain for, later in the week. And it doesn't look all that cold into the holiday, which it is what it is. I mean, I never get too, bent out of shape, because I always say, something I say on TV quite a bit is, Mother Nature likes to even things out, over time. So we've had
Feels like balance.
Yeah, we've had 3 mild Decembers, these last 3, and now all of a sudden we're having a harsh December so far. And we've had harsh weather for the first half of the month, and perhaps it'll be not as harsh for the second half of the month. So I just take what Mother Nature gives. I leave it at that.
We have to roll with it. And there will be some folks that are happy about it. It might make for some slightly better travel conditions, right? We have at least some warmer conditions. The road prep can be, a little bit better. A lot of folks driving around through the Christmas holidays, but it is, I think, kind of Mother Nature's little prank on us to give us these perfect, like picture perfect snows with the big pillows hanging on the evergreens and then wash it all away 10 days before Christmas. The stats here in Milwaukee are about the same as what you guys have. If you look at the region, we're at about a 41 to 50%. Actual MKE, the airport, is actually a little bit lower. Its proximity to the lake kind of knocks it down more into the 20, 30% range. And I've looked at some of the areas where you got a better chance. Statistically, Marquette, Michigan, that's a go-to spot. According to the National Weather Service, like you said, Rich, give them credit, 96% chance there of seeing a white Christmas. And then in Wisconsin, Green Bay, about a 75% chance, just based on historical data. Chicago, like you said, Emily, you're getting about a 30-40% chance.
Yeah.
Northern Illinois might give you a slight improvement, but those are your best shots, at least regionally, if you just got to have that Christmassy feel. Now, let's talk a bit more here about the longer range, get deeper into the winter, because officially, meteorological winter started back on December 1. But we are looking at the official start of astronomical winter just around the corner. The good news here, guys, we're going to start getting some more daylight.
Yeah, I think we're all ready for that, especially those of us who are at the beginning of Central Time, right?
Yes, we talked about that. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, those early four. I think our sunset's around 4:17 right now, 4:19. It's very, very early. But yes, I think we are all looking forward to counting those daylight minutes as they begin to stack up, which is, it's always so odd to think about that we're at the very beginning of winter and people seem to think like winter, dark days. Yes, we have that, but it's like as winter starts, those days do start getting a little bit warmer. So, or not warmer, longer. Not warmer, unfortunately. We have to wait until spring for that. But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, warmer days ahead. Makes us all feel better.
Exactly. The daylight, even on those cold days, when it was the cold, sunny days, I was in a far less grumpy mood than it was the cold, gray days for sure. Now, Eastern time zone, of course, for you in Detroit, that doesn't make any difference, of course, when it comes to adding some daylight. It does give you some more favorable sunrise and sunset times. But, Rich, I'm sure you and the rest of Detroit are ready for a little bit more daylight.
You know what's interesting, and I think you'll agree because you're all, at about the same northernness, here in the Great Lakes. But, this time of year, my house, the backside of the house faces south. So there's no leaves left in the trees. And so when we do have sun, it comes right into the back part of my house and it fills it up and it's great. It's a nice warm sun. But it's amazing how low the angle is of the sun. I mean, even at 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock noon, I mean, I just sometimes look and have to take like a second look, like, wow, look how low the sun is, at this time of year. So not only will we get, longer days or more daylight, but the angle will start to creep up and it's a welcome thing. But when we have sun, it's easily noticeable how low the sun is in the sky.
Yeah. My main windows in the kitchen, same thing, faces south like you're Rich. And sometimes, you look out and the sun's barely clearing the treetops on the other side of the cul-de-sac. So it's like, yeah, very low. But the one thing you can do to get a higher sun angle is travel closer to the equator, which is what you did, Rich. I mean, we are jealous, but at least I am. I can't speak for everyone.
Yes.
Wish we had joined you. Tell us a bit about your trip to Key West.
Yes, last week I spent like 4 days, 4 nights in Key West with the longtime girlfriend. We had a wonderful time. We flew right into Key West. So we went from Detroit to Atlanta and then Atlanta flight right to Key West. And we didn't even rent a car. And we went snorkeling one day. Now, the water wasn't all that warm over the coral areas just south of Key West, but we were in the water having a good time. We saw dolphins and we saw lots of colorful fish. And there's some old forts there. But it's nice when we're dealing with the deep freeze here in the Great Lakes, and then you travel 3 or 4 hours on an airplane, and then it's 80 degrees, and that's what we had. We had 3.5 days of 80-degree weather, and shorts and t-shirts. It was really nice. I was thinking of both of you.
Oh, I'm sure you were.
Yeah, sure you were. Of course, the locals probably weren't in shorts and t-shirts. That was probably chilly for them.
It's interesting because the cruise ships come and go out of Key West. And so almost every day there's a different cruise ship. And, you see a whole different, you know, group of people walking around the downtown area. But the locals, I think they welcome it because it's so hot there in the summertime. I mean, it's humid and it's hot. I think this time of year they enjoy it as well.
It's a good point. Yeah, it's probably perfect. The humidity is maybe a little improved, and certainly temperatures are a little more manageable. Well, it's good to see you got away for a little vacay. Maybe next time we meet in a couple of weeks here, we can talk about some good getaway spots and maybe give our listeners and viewers some ideas of where they might look for a beautiful getaway and check out some dolphins. Thank you both for joining me again today for yet another episode here. And since we won't be meeting likely before the holiday, happy holidays to you both. Merry Christmas. I hope you get everything you want from Santa Claus and nothing you don't want from Mother Nature.
Hey, I like that wish.
That's a great way to put it, Rob. Really. Happy holidays to both of you and enjoy, spend time with the families. And the Bears are hot. I mean, we'll give it credit where credit is due. The Bears are running hot, and it's exciting.
Yeah, I'll have to take your word for it because all I know about it, like I said, is the weather. I know they're doing well. I couldn't tell you the stats.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll get there. Someday I'll learn the sport, everybody. I promise.
There you go. As long as you know the weather, which we know you do, I don't think anybody in the sports department is going to complain. I'm just happy to say that the Packers have beat both your teams at least once this season. So I can rest on that at this point, and we will rest on that. This has been another edition of the Isobar, the highs and lows of meteorology.